All right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Legends of the Dugout. I'm Dave. Today, I got a special guest again with me, Mike Peich, one of my friends. It's a dealer at the National. He's going to be talking to us a little baseball history and a little recap on his National. So, none other than Mike Peich himself.
Hello, Dave.
Thank you for doing this again.
Oh well, I always enjoy talking with you. We have a good time.
Yes.
And you make me sound like I'm some sort of media star here. I'm hardly that. Although I'm always amazed. This is our third time talking. Last
Maybe
I think it's the
maybe
third.
it's the third, maybe fourth time.
Yeah, whatever, 3 or 4. But this past July, a couple people came up to the table and said, "I saw you on YouTube." And after we did our first one in 2024, same thing happened. And I thought, whoa, there's a lot of people out there with too much time on their hands,
Yes.
paying attention to me.
Well, I know a few people that I'm friends with that do YouTube, and they always reach out and, oh, I can listen to him all day.
No, they're talking about you, Dave.
No.
You ask good questions.
So, you had a good national?
Yeah, I did. I sold a bunch of cards and bought a bunch of cards, met some new people. My interest has completely shifted from tobacco cards and dead ball era has completely shifted to African American baseball, Negro leagues, Caribbean baseball, that sort of thing. And I met someone and made a new friend from Puerto Rico who's actually just published a book on a series issued by Toleteros, which some people I'm certain are aware of. And his name is Angel Colon. He's Puerto Rican, lives in San Juan, and he's done this fabulous research on Toleteros. It's the authoritative book on Toleteros. So anybody interested in the Puerto Rican baseball from the era of, this is late 40s, early 50s, that these cards were issued. Angel has written the definitive study, and he's only publishing this book in a limited edition. So anybody who's interested in it, get in touch with Angel Colon. He's the guy. And I'd be happy to provide his contact information. But I met him, met other people, spent some time talking with you. That's always fun.
Did you meet him at the National?
I met him at the National.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He said, somebody sent me over here to your table because he said, and I can see why they sent me here. You've got the kind of stuff that interests me. It's all mostly Negro League stuff.
Okay.
But what was interesting too was that at the National, I got rid of some of my my dead ball era stuff too, in preparation to have the funds to acquire other things. So it was a very good National. Not only, as I said, did I meet people, but I also bought some interesting things that. One of the things that, pardon me, I'm just going to take a sip here.
No, that's all right.
This is water, not vodka.
No judgment.
No judgment. One of the things that interests me, and it's probably the major motivator for me, is learning the history of these cards, which leads you to learning the history of the players and the era. It leads you to learning the history of the leagues. It's all that knowledge acquisition that I just love. I love learning new things. And that's some of the things I acquired at the National have led me down new paths that I hadn't even been aware of prior to the National. So that for me is always exciting. And those are the kind of the two areas that I wanted to talk a little bit about today in our conversation.
Okay.
So if you want to, pardon me, show the.
Well, before we get into that, I do have a question.
Sure.
Do you regret selling the Claxton card?
Yeah, you and I talked about the fact that I was going to take my Jimmy Claxton card with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I put a ridiculous amount on it, and somebody paid it, and I did have some pangs of regret about selling it, but I made a nice profit, and it allowed me to buy other things.
Okay.
Fast forward about, I don't know, 2 months later, 2.5 months later, another friend of mine who's a dealer, he got in touch with me and said, "Are you interested in a Jimmy Claxton card?" And I said, "Funny you should ask. Yes, I am interested in a Jimmy Claxton card." So, long story short, he was selling these cards for someone else. I bought the Claxton, had it graded, and PSA gave it a 1. So I now have another Jimmy Claxton card.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
It turned out well. And what's interesting there, and I'll put a little plug in here for Hake's auctions. I think Tuesday is when the current auction ends. They have a photograph of Claxton when he played in, I can't remember if it's a Dominican team or a Puerto Rican team, but it's one of the few photographs that show Jimmy Claxton. And that really caught my attention. But it's currently at something like $7,000, and I don't think I'm going to acquire that.
Okay.
That's a little beyond, my budget. But there are very few images of Jimmy Claxton. The most notable one is the 1916 Z-Nut. And then there's another one that I've seen that's a photograph of him, and now there's this one. So to my knowledge, there's only three images of Claxton.
Okay.
But there may be others. So yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I kind of regretted it, but my regret was abated a couple months later when I acquired another one. So
Well, it was meant to be for you to
yeah,
keep.
it was pure luck.
Yeah.
Absolutely pure luck, because my friend knows I collect these things, and he said, "Are you looking for one?" I said, "Yep, I sure am." So
All right. So what I'm about to pull up now is your purchase at the National, correct?
yeah.
So is it just these two?
No, I bought. I found out at the National. I went to this one fellow's table. It's a man named Phil Gary, and Phil is quite knowledgeable about the Negro Leagues. He's quite knowledgeable about Caribbean baseball. He's knowledgeable about all aspects of baseball, but he seems to have a real deep knowledge
Okay.
of Caribbean baseball.
Okay. I think I met Phil.
Yeah. He sets up with Andy. I'm blanking on Andy's last name. In any event, he and I were talking, and he showed me these postcards, these real photo postcards, and they're from the Dominican. They were issued in 1952 and 1953. And I looked at them and I said, "What are these?" I'd never seen them. I'd seen later things from the Dominican, but never seen these. And he didn't know much about them either, apart from the fact that these postcards were issued every week to honor the player of the week in the Dominican Summer League. In the Dominican Summer League, I think in 52 and 53, there were 4 teams. I may be wrong on that. I've just started my research. But the Dominican teams brought players from all over the place, mostly the Caribbean, many of them Dominican. But they also signed American players, guys who had played in the Negro Leagues. And that's what caught my attention when I saw these cards, because if you want to show the first one now.
Yeah.
This is Alonzo Perry. He was born in Alabama, and he died in Alabama. But he had an interesting career. He started out in, I think, 1945, and he played for the Atlanta Black Crackers. He was a pitcher, but he also played. So many of these guys, even though they were pitchers, they would also play in the outfield if they needed to give somebody a rest that day. But he would also play first base as well. And then in 1948, he signed with the Homestead Grays. And he left the Grays not quite halfway through the season, because he got in some kind of argument with the owner of the Grays. And he went to the Birmingham Black Barons. He went back to Alabama, to his home state. And he stayed with Birmingham for quite some time. I think he stayed with them for at least a couple of years. In any event, he pitched in the 48. In 1948, the Grays won they were the champions of, I forget the league they were in at that point. But he was part of their regular roster. He had started to play a little bit more first base, and he was kind of noted for his hitting. I mean, he slowly started to, show his prowess as a hitter, and it was the Negro American League, I think it was called, in 1948. So he was on that team, but then he developed arm problems, and he wasn't as effective as a pitcher, but he was beginning to emerge more as a hitter. I think it was 1949 or 50, I can't recall. He ended up signing with the Oakland team, and he's actually pictured on, I think it's the Mother's Cookies issue. I'd have to go back and check that, when he was with Oakland. But he played with them for a year. He was used primarily as a hitter. Now he's really no longer pitching. He didn't have a very good year hitting. But then in I think it was 1951 was his first year that he played in Mexico. And then he also played in the Dominican. I think he started in the Dominican in either 51 or 52. But he played in their summer and winter leagues, and that's when he really took off as a hitter.
Okay.
Perry was a big guy. He was 6'3", about, 220 pounds. I mean, you can see in this photograph, he looks muscular. He became this very good hitter, not only hitting for average, but also hitting with power. In fact, I think in the Dominican League, 2 years he won the batting title, and 1 year he won the home run title. He actually played in Mexico until 1963, I think it was. So he played for quite a while, but it was only after he went to teams in the Dominican and Mexico where he really took off as a hitter. And he's become something of a legendary guy among hardcore Negro League collectors. He appears on 2 different cards from this series. This one is from July the 9th, 1953. I have another one of him, same pose, but he's looking a little bit to his right. That was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks later. And he's just, somebody that the average baseball fan has probably never heard of. But within the bunch of us who are, geeks about the Negro Leagues, he's very well known. So when I saw that, I knew right away, this is Alonzo Perry. but I didn't know anything about the set. But then the other one that was in that group, and you can show the next card, was Roberto Vargas. And Roberto Vargas was from Puerto Rico. He played, I think he played in the Negro Leagues 1 year. He played, I think, pretty certain it's 1948. He played for the Chicago American Giants. And then Vargas actually went on to have a kind of a minor career, no pun intended, in the minor leagues. And he actually played he was a pitcher. He actually played for the 55 Milwaukee Braves. So anybody who collects the 55 Milwaukee Braves, he would probably appear in the 56 set. Look for Roberto Vargas. He had a relatively short major league career. And as I said, played most of his time in the minor leagues. Vargas had a much longer life than Perry. Perry died at the age of 61. Perry was kind of renowned for his drinking and womanizing. In fact, he was an early teammate of Willie Mays. And the ownership, and Willie Mays was pretty young at the time. So the ownership wanted older players to kind of mentor Mays and, help him through the rigors of a season. And so different players, were assigned to, watch out for him and help him out, take him around, etc., except for Alonzo Perry, because they knew Perry was had these habits.
Okay.
Perry never made it to the major leagues, even though as a hitter, he probably could have played the major leagues. From what little bit I've read, it was probably his lifestyle that kept him out of the major leagues. But he was certainly a great hitter. And Vargas, was a good pitcher, good enough to have a minor league career and a short stint with the Braves. Now, not now, the Brewers. In any event, pardon me. So when I saw those cards, I knew I had to buy these, and I did. And now, as I said, I'm trying to find out more information about the set, but it's very difficult. Oftentimes, I'll get referred to some resource that's written in Spanish, and I don't read Spanish, so I'm kind of running into some roadblocks. A friend of mine said that these cards were issued by a magazine, but I can't find any reference to that either. So if anybody happens to watch this and knows anything about these cards, knows anything about the producer, I know they were issued in 52 and 53. I know they were issued to honor the player of the week. But beyond that, I don't know much at all. So
are they blank back, or they have or are they postcards, like you could put a stamp?
Yeah, some of them have postcard backs.
Okay.
And I only have one that has a postcard back. And I think it's from 1952. But the rest of them that I have are blank back. So
okay.
I do know that some, at least, were issued with a postcard back.
Now, have you found that has a player been like player of the week like multiple times, or they are?
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
One?
I mean, Alonzo Perry was at least twice in 1953. Willard Brown is part of the series. There have been at least two Willard Brown versions that have appeared. Chet Brewer was part of it. He was a pretty well-known pitcher in the Negro Leagues. I don't know if anybody like Oscar Charleston. I don't know if Charleston played in the Dominican, But, so many of these folks played everywhere. They were just looking for a place to play ball and make some money. I know that his name just went right out of my head. It'll come back. So it's this odd mixture, of players that have become better known as the research continues and their names surface, as well as players who aren't really known, apart from, in the case of some of them, being well known throughout the Caribbean. But not all of them played in the Negro Leagues.
Okay.
Oh, Silvio Garcia.
Yeah.
He was one. He played in the Dominican, and a friend of mine has a Silvio Garcia version from this series, which I'd love to have. I mean, Silvio Garcia was quite the character, and just one terrific ball player. My thought just went right out of my head. Alonzo Perry appears on a number of cards. He appears in the Toleteros series. I think he's in the 48-49 and the 49-50, and I can't recall if he's in the 50-51.
Okay.
So there are, and he appears. There was a series in 50-51 called Denia. Denia was, I think they were a powdered milk manufacturer, but they issued a series of cards called In Action, and Perry appears in a couple of those. So these players, didn't necessarily have American cards, but they were well known throughout the Caribbean. And there was active collecting. I mean, there were active issues of cards for the various leagues throughout the Caribbean, just as there were in the United States.
Okay.
So that finding these was really exciting. And when I got home, my wife and I had travel plans, and so I couldn't really turn my attention to them for several weeks. But once I started digging in, now I'm consumed. Now I want to find out more, and I want to, it's just that, finding out about stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So, where do you want to move on to now?
Well, after the National, and this was at the Oaks show, the Philly show, held in Oaks, Pennsylvania. A friend of mine who's a dealer said, this other dealer here has a Negro League piece that is going to knock you out. And he said, it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I said, oh, okay, well, where is it? And he said, I have to call him first to see if he'll show it to you, because he's not showing it to people. And I said, oh, okay. I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And so he called the guy, who shall remain nameless. He doesn't want to be known. So I went over and met him. And he kind of, asked me a bunch of questions, and I answered them. And then he took out these two pieces, one of which is a scorecard, and the other is a baseball from the game. And I was absolutely blown away. So if you want to show the front of the scorecard, you can see it's a night game played between the Homestead Grays and the Kansas City Monarchs. And it was played on Monday, July 21st, 1930. And it was played in Altoona. Altoona had a very active semi-pro history. Most of it's sponsored. If you see at the bottom, it's the auspices of the Altoona Works Athletic Association. The Altoona Works was the Pennsylvania Railroad. Altoona was where most of the locomotives were built for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And the Altoona Works had this very active semi-pro league, or teams rather. And it goes back several years before 1930. In fact, one of the guys I was researching in the dead ball era was a guy named Fred Stair, who had played in the minor leagues, in the low-level minor leagues in 1908, 9, and 10. He was from Altoona. And when he stopped playing professionally, he went back, got a job at the Altoona Works, and played in their league until he stopped playing. But this really caught my eye for several reasons. If you want to show the next slide, this is what the interior of the scorecard looks like, and it's it's unscored. Actually, the Grays won the game 6-1, so I don't know what the 8 and the 2 are. Maybe the person who had this couldn't remember the actual scores, so knew it was kind of lopsided and just wrote these numbers down. But you can't see this at all on what's shown on the screen. But at the top,
do you want me to see if I can get you full screen, and then you can put the clicker up and see if we can do that?
Yeah, try that.
Okay.
Because there's some interesting players for each team.
Your solo screen.
What am I doing? Should I do something?
I thought you were going to show the scorecard with names up on it. Yeah. See if you can get it like where you can see the names.
I don't know that you can see them because it's backwards. I can read them to you.
Okay.
That might be easier. For the Homestead Grays, there's a guy playing first baseman by the name of Charleston. That would be Oscar Charleston.
Okay.
There's a guy playing third base, and they misspelled his name here, Johnston, but it's actually Judy Johnston. He's playing third. Buck Ewing is catching. On the pitching staff is Smokey Joe Williams. That's over here on the left. There are big names here. Playing second base is George Scales. He's a big name. Vic Harris is playing left field, also a substantial name. And then for the Monarchs, you've got Cool Papa Bell. He's up there at the top. He led off. He's a middle fielder, although they've got him listed as MF. I won't go there. You've also got Duncan playing first base, but pitching for them is Chet Brewer and Bullet Joe Rogan. So I saw this, and I'm looking at all these names and recognizing them and thinking, holy crap, I'm holding something really significant. And because I was in my brain, I'm trying to process, it's 1930. And I knew that Kansas City Monarchs, somewhere in the early 30s, developed the first portable lighting system. And I thought it was either 30 or 31. I couldn't remember. And the cell phone reception was pretty bad in there. I couldn't look it up quickly. But I knew this was really significant. And then there was this ball, and you can show that next. This was a ball that shows, first of all, the score there in the sweet spot. The Grays beat the Monarchs 6-1. And then on top of it, on the top panel, if you want to show the next one, it indicates that this was the first night game played in Altoona at Cricket Field. Cricket Field was the place where all the semi-pro games took place. And in fact, the Homestead Grays used Altoona for some of their games. They would come to Altoona and play. Sometimes other Negro League teams, sometimes other semi-pro teams. So they had an established presence in Altoona. So I'm looking at this, and I'm holding this ball, and I'm holding the scorecard, and I'm trying to be cool about the whole thing. And my heart is just racing, and my brain is going like nuts. So, we had a conversation. I told the dealer seemed interested in possibly selling it. We had a couple of phone conversations. He realized that I was a serious collector, that I was not going to buy this and try to flip it, in a heritage auction and make a bunch of money. And my wife and I can, buy a villa in Italy and disappear. So we came to a price, agreed upon a price, and I met him, a couple weeks later, and I now own it. It's now in my collection. So when I got home that night, I had pictures of it, and I showed my wife, and I said, "This is really cool." And she said, "Really? What's so cool about it?" And she knows a little bit. She knows who the Homestead Grays are and the Kansas City Monarchs. And I said, "I think this has a significant relationship to Negro League history." So I got on the computer and I started digging around. And what I discovered was that in 1930, J.L. Wilkerson, who owned the Kansas City Monarchs, a lot was going on in 1930. The year before, the fall before, the stock market crashed. And so, the financial world just imploded or exploded. And that affected baseball, quite obviously, but it really affected Negro League baseball, because people now suddenly did not have the kind of expendable income that they could pay to go to games. And the other thing that played into it, so that's a significant thing, and Wilkinson, J.L. Wilkinson is a white guy who owns a team of black players, but he's devoted to the sport, and he wants to keep his team going. And he'd been pretty successful. He'd won some championships in the early 20s. And in fact, he won the championship in 1929, but there was no World Series because of the crash of the market. So the other significant piece of this is that the Negro National League, which had been started in 1920 to organize all of the Negro League teams, had been formed by Rube Foster. In 1930, Rube Foster dies, and also the league just disappears. There's no money. They can't support it. Foster was the glue that held everything together, and he dies, and poof. There is no more official Negro League, either in the West or the East. The Eastern Negro League had been started by Ed Bolden, who owned the Hilldale Club, the Hilldale Giants. So Wilkinson finds himself in this terrible situation. How am I going to keep my team alive? And he'd been thinking about developing a system where you could light a field and play night games. Because keep in mind, a lot of their games were played on the weekends when working people weren't working. You couldn't play a day game necessarily and expect a lot of people, because most people who would come to the games had jobs, and they couldn't, they couldn't necessarily get off from their jobs and go to a game. So Wilkinson realizes all of this, and he has this idea: can I create a lighting system that will allow me to play games at night. And this was something that had already been thought about, and there had been a couple of people who had experimented, but it was Wilkinson who really kind of dug down. There'd been a guy in Des Moines, Iowa, in fact, a man named Kaiser. He had a team called the Des Moines Demons, and he wanted to develop a lighting system. And by the way, Wilkinson knew him, so they weren't trying to compete with one another. But Kaiser wanted a permanent system. Wilkinson wanted a portable system so that he could take his lights anywhere in the country, put them up, illuminate a field, and play a game at night. They both went to a manufacturer, a lighting manufacturer called Giant Manufacturing. I love that name. They were based in Omaha, Nebraska. And they developed a system for Wilkinson whereby he could set up a pole behind first base. A pole behind third base. He could have some lights in the outfield. And it was completely portable. They could run these poles up. They could string the lights up. The lights consisted of 6 huge, I don't know how many watt bulbs. And then the bus that they used to use for for transporting the players, they converted to their power source. They had a generator in there. And this huge generator would start up and poof, you would have lights. And it was just incredible. The players were a little disgusted at first because they lost their luxury bus that they rode around in. But he took care of that by renting taxi cabs, actually, owned by one of the players. So they would travel around the country. And on, I think it was April 28th, 1930, in, of all places, Enid, Oklahoma, they premiered this system. And it was a huge success. People started coming out by the thousands to see night games because this was it was such a novelty. People had never seen a game played at night.
Yeah.
So everywhere they went, they got these big crowds. So they start, and this is the Monarchs now. So they start out in Texas, Oklahoma. They slowly work their way up through Missouri. In fact, they stopped in St. Louis, Missouri, and the owner of the Cardinals went to see a game, and he was just blown away. And he ordered a permanent system for one of his minor league teams. He wasn't convinced enough yet to do it at the major league level. And then eventually they made their way to Kansas City at Mulebach Stadium, and they premiered the lights there. So all that by way of, on July the 18th. So now keep in mind, go back to the front. There you go. So on July the 18th, they come to Pittsburgh, and this is where they play the Grays for the first time. So what happens is, so on July the 18th, they play the Monarchs play the Grays. They string up the stadium, the lights, and by the way, it's at Forbes Field, where the Pirates played. They've rented Forbes Field, put the lights up. They play the first night game at Forbes Field, and I think the Grays won that one something like 12-1. The next day, on the 19th, they play an afternoon game at Forbes Field. Again, the Monarchs and the Grays. And then they play a night game. So now you've played 2 games in one day. You've doubled at least your income. You can see where this is headed.
Yeah.
So they leave Pittsburgh on the 20th, and they go up to Altoona, which is north and east of Pittsburgh. They set up the lights there on the 21st, and they play the first night game in Altoona. 15,000 people showed up for this night game in Altoona. And the newspaper reports I've read said it was a perfect Altoona day, which meant, it wasn't searing hot and terrible humidity or anything of the sort. 15,000 people. Chet Brewer pitched that night, or no, yeah, he pitched for the Monarchs, and Britt, I'm forgetting Britt's first name. He pitched for the Grays, and the Grays won 6-1. Neither Cool Papa Bell did not play in that game. Judy Johnson did. Oscar Charleston did. Frank Duncan, who was the first baseman for the Grays, he played. And the Grays won 6-1. So the next day, July 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, they go a little bit west and play a couple teams out there. But then on July 25th, and that's what makes this so significant, on July 25th, they come back to Pittsburgh. They come back to Forbes Field. And pitching that day for the Grays is, oh God, I hate this when I forget people's names, and I know them as well as my own. It'll come back to me. Smokey Joe Williams. He's pitching that day, and catching for him is Buck Ewing, who was the regular catcher for the Grays. I can't believe I forgot Smokey Joe's name. They pull in this really big crowd for this game rather. There are thousands of people there because what's happened now is that the word has spread via the newspapers about this incredible invention that allows for a night game. So what's happening now is this allows Wilkinson to play both an afternoon game and a night game. And he's just bringing in more money. And from what little reading I've done so far, before the season even gets really completely underway, he's paid for the lights. That's how successful it was.
Oh, wow.
And keep in mind, too, that Wilkinson, the figure I've read is $50,000, which in 1930 dollars would be hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2025 dollars. Wilkinson partnered with a guy who owned a billiard room in Kansas City. And then Wilkinson literally liquidated all his assets and to put it in and gambled. This was a huge financial gamble. And it worked. So on July 25th, Smokey Joe Williams is pitching, Buck Ewing is catching. And this is the legend, okay? But I'm going to say something about that in a moment.
Okay.
So legend has it that, the lights could not illuminate the way they illuminate in a modern day park, even in a minor league park. The problem was the catcher couldn't go through his normal signs because, you can imagine a catcher with his legs spread and his glove down. You can't see as clearly. So they had a couple, if the glove was up, it was a fastball. If it was down, it was a breaking ball, something like that.
Okay.
Smokey Joe Williams thought Ewing called for a breaking ball when in fact, Smokey Joe Williams, Ewing calls for a breaking ball. Smokey Joe Williams thinks he's called for a fastball. Ewing is expecting a breaking ball, gets this blazing fastball, and it splits his finger. And now he can't catch. So legend has it that Cum Posey, who owned the Homestead Grays, comes down, and Judy Johnson is the one, Judy Johnson's playing third base and managing. He's the one who tells this story. And that is, they knew Josh Gibson was at the game. They had known of Josh Gibson as a rising star. Composey supposedly told Gibson, "Stay ready, because the day's going to come and we're going to make you a Homestead Gray." So the legend goes that Josh Gibson's in the stands. Composey, they call time. Their backup catcher is playing right field. He can't catch. So they get a uniform for Josh Gibson. He comes down. He takes over for Buck Ewing. And that's Josh Gibson's first game in professional baseball. Now, if you go on Major League Baseball's website,
Okay.
that's what they report. That's the story they tell. And most people repeat that story. Is it true? I kind of think it isn't. But certainly, I think his first biographer pointed out that probably didn't happen that way, that they probably got through that game without Ewing. But certainly on July 26th, Gibson was with the team. Gibson doesn't play a whole lot that year, although they bring him along slowly. He catches all the BP. He's they just slowly work him into the lineup. And later that year, he starts hitting these monster home runs. But what's interesting about this piece is that, first of all, it represents one of the, to my mind, few pieces of ephemera that relate to that first year that the Monarchs pioneered portable lighting. And, you've also got this really cool ball that tests to the fact that, and I don't think it's a game ball, but, it is an official league ball. So,
is there anything else on that ball?
The guy who owned it at one point put his name on it, which, is too bad. He was a kind of shady character, I found out. But
because it seems like underneath the cricket field, it seems like somebody wrote.
Altoona, PA. Yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy who acquired it. I don't know how he acquired it.
Okay.
So he wrote that, and then he also wrote here on the side panel, property of Bucky Wayne. So, to my mind, this is an important piece of, or two pieces rather, of memorabilia. Clearly, you've got this ephemeral, and they're very ephemeral. I don't know how many other places where the Monarchs played utilizing their new system was it memorialized quite like this. But then what makes it even more interesting from my perspective is that 4 days later, Josh Gibson starts playing professional baseball. And that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my latest acquisition. And it's, as you know, I love to learn. And
so with this piece here, if it had Gibson's name in it, what would, like, I don't know what you paid for this piece, but
it would.
I'm not going to ask. It's not my business.
Yeah, I wouldn't tell you.
You feel like it would be how many more times?
10 times.
Okay.
Easily. Because it would have been one of the first times Josh Gibson appears in a game. There's right now, I forget whose auction it is, but somebody's auctioning off a ticket from Jackie Robinson's debut in 1957, April 15th.
Okay.
I forget who the Dodgers played that day. In any event, the thinking is that this ticket is going to sell for easily $400,000 to $500,000, because there's only something like 13 or 14 examples known.
Okay.
Of a ticket from that game, and it could be more. It could be double that figure. You could have a 7-figure item. $1 million item. Josh Gibson, who was every bit the ball player Jackie Robinson was. He wasn't a good defensive catcher, but he's just one of the greatest hitters ever. Had his name been in that, I doubt the guy would have shown it to me. And he knew Oscar Charleston was in it. That's a very significant name.
Yeah.
Cool Papa Bell's in it. Judy Johnson's in it. Bullet Joe Rogan. Pardon me. They're in it too. In fact, there's a man named Phil Dixon who is a wonderful researcher about the Negro Leagues. And he contacted me and said, Phil lives, I think Phil lives in Kansas City, and he's affiliated with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. He asked me if I'd be willing to donate it to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And he said, would you at least be willing to loan it for a time? I guess to be displayed. I don't know. But, I don't know that I'm at that point yet. I still want to find out more about it. Now I'm fascinated by trying to pin down when did Josh Gibson actually first play? Because, it's the stuff of legend that, he comes down out of the stadium and he goes in the locker room and puts on a Homestead Grays on.
You would figure there'd be like some kind of like newspaper article.
Well, here's the problem with that. Mm-hmm. You would think, right? But we're looking at it from our perspective of 2025, when the media covers everything. In 1930, there are such incomplete records for Negro League games. You would be astounded. They just don't exist. You can go to, I went to the Altoona paper and got the information about the July 21st game because that was a big, they covered that completely. It's a real long article.
Okay.
But, and there's an article about the July 25th game, but there's no, and that's from a couple of the Pittsburgh papers. There's no mention of Ewing being injured. There's no mention of Gibson coming into the game. So what I have to do now is just start working backwards. Was he in the lineup on the 26th?
So, because where was that game at? The one that they say
Pittsburgh.
Gibson? It was actually in Pittsburgh?
Oh, at Forbes Field.
Okay.
Yeah. They had tens of thousands of people at that game. So, and this is one of the interesting things about biography and just historical recollection. A lot of times we rely, history rather, oftentimes is based upon somebody's recollection of what happened. So Judy Johnson, Hall of Famer,
mm-hmm.
distinguished player, highly esteemed man, a very famous guy. And he's telling the story. I was there. I saw it. Come Posey went up in the stands and got Josh Gibson. And, without him, we couldn't have finished the game. But is that really what happened? The more you tell that story, and it sounds really cool, it's the stuff of legends.
Yeah.
It's it becomes believable, and it becomes a really good story. But it may not have been true. So people are divided on that. But I can tell you for a fact, you go to Major League Baseball website, that's the story they'll tell you.
Is there anything like Saber has?
What's that?
The Saber?
Oh, the Saber, there's a guy who wrote an extensive article on Gibson's early years. He tells the same story. But he says in that article that we don't know that it was actually true because there's insufficient evidence to provide a definitive statement that, yes, he was in the lineup. And what usually happens is that the paper will say, you know, X came in and was a substitute player. So, you know, that's indicated. So I don't know. If anybody listening to this has any information they can share with me, please do, because I'm on a mission now.
Now, if you do, you know, I can give them your email address and
Oh,
then
absolutely. Yeah. So that was the second piece I picked up, or the second acquisition I made, and it's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool, but you know,
well, I'm glad you're finally getting some sleep again.
Yeah. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This sort of thing wakes you up during the night, and you think, "Oh my God, you know, can't wait to start digging back into this thing." And the fact that you and I are talking today, when my wife and I were driving home from visiting our daughter this weekend, and she was talking with me, my mind was just, it was way out there.
Man, that's just crazy that you got these pieces.
Yeah.
That they're still around.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that these things still exist is remarkable. And the ball in particular, you know, it looks as though it could have been a game used ball because there's, you know, there are abrasions on it. I don't think it was, but I think it's probably just knocked around in somebody's drawer or bucket or something like that. I don't know where it was stored.
Yeah, I think then it was probably not a game used ball.
No.
I mean, because they only had, you know, they at that time they probably just one ball to play with the whole game.
No, they would have several. But
Okay.
by 1930, in a game like this, no, they would have several.
Okay.
Had it been 1909, yeah, they probably would have only had one.
Okay.
But the fact that these things were saved is just, to me, remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, you know, people get programs and they look at them and then just toss them.
Yeah.
You know, I did that with tickets years ago. I would just toss the tickets after the game. There are a couple of games that I really regret having seen and tossing. I don't toss tickets now, but of course, there are no tickets anymore.
Yeah.
It's all electronic. So that's it, Dave. Those are my two most recent finds.
Okay.
It's been a lot of fun.
I don't know if we covered it in a previous, you know, talk, but how did you go about from switching from the dead ball era and everything else, and then just pretty much just focus on the Negro Leagues?
I've always been somebody who, in my academic career, I was never one who was all that interested in the mainstream stuff. I was interested in the kind of outliers. And, you know, it's why when I collected tobacco era stuff, dead ball stuff, I collected, you know, the big sets like T206 and all of that. But what really piqued my interest was the lesser known stuff, you know, like T209 and T211 that highlighted minor league players, some of whom would go on to play in the majors. But, you know, Joe Jackson being the perfect example of that. But I don't know. I started doing research on Negro League stuff, and I started I started buying Beacons, acquiring Beacons. They're 1923-24. They were issued in Cuba.
Okay.
And the more I did the research, and then I was asked to give a talk on anything I wanted having to do with the Negro Leagues, and I did. And I concentrated on barnstorming. And, you know, that that kind of outlier stuff, which is not really outlier, but it was outlier in the sense that history did not treat black ball players very well because history ignored them for decades. And part of it was my sense of social justice too. These stories need to be told.
Yeah.
And not enough people are telling them. And that just got me even further involved because of the real injustice that was done to people who wanted to play baseball. All they wanted to do was play baseball. But because of the color of their skin, they could not do it in a way that white people could do it. They were, in many instances, just as good as the white players, but they were banned.
Yeah.
They were prevented from playing it. And that sense of injustice really rankled. When I gave my first talk, by the end of the talk, I was so worked up that I was almost in tears, because of, and I think the audience could sense that. These people had just, had been ignored. These really skilled baseball players, and some of them had to stoop to really demeaning levels to play their games. They had to dress up like clowns so that people could come and see them play and laugh. And I mean, it's kind of like the Savannah Bananas,
Mm-hmm.
But the difference there is that we're talking about people whose skin is dark.
Yeah.
And they became kind of in many situations, they became kind of amusement, something unusual. How can these folks do that?
Yeah.
Well, they could do it because they were superb athletes. And they loved the game. They absolutely loved the game.
Okay.
So that's
No,
that's probably way more than you want to know.
Going to that, but are you still collecting the I guess the minor league stuff in like your hometown?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. I'm still doing that, most definitely.
Okay.
But there's not a whole lot there, not a whole lot there to collect. And I gave a talk just before the National about that team.
And has that been broadcasted yet? Because
no. Oh yeah. You know what? I don't know why I can't get a link to that, but I will keep working to get that link and send it to you.
is it on?
It's supposedly on YouTube, but the
Okay.
local history center is very protective of the links. So, I talked with the director the other day, and I said, "What's going on?" Because a couple of other people would like to see it too.
Okay. Yeah, because the one talk that you were just talking about, I think that's on YouTube. And
yeah.
I watched that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one about barnstorming.
Yep.
Yeah. But then here's a little funny story. As a teacher, you really understand audience, or you should understand audience. And sometimes you'd look out at your classroom and, people are sitting there with their eyes back up in their heads. And I gave a shorter version of the talk on the Parksburg, the Pico team.
Okay.
This summer. And as I'm giving this talk, it was a very small group. I did it as a favor for a friend of mine. It was a very small group. And this guy, it was during, a luncheon meeting. And this guy fell asleep during my talk. He just absolutely fell asleep. He had walked into the luncheon and ordered a double martini, and I knew at that point that, he'd probably fall asleep. And he did. And then, the applause woke him up. As I'm walking out, he comes up to me and said, "Boy, I really enjoyed your talk today." And I was so tempted to say, "Which part did you enjoy? The part before you fell asleep or when you woke up?" But I didn't. kept my mouth shut. I said, well, thank you very much. It's a subject, dear to my heart. But that talk was a talk about this white team that played these major Negro League teams that came to this little tiny town in Parksburg, Pennsylvania. So again, it all kind of, dovetails.
Okay.
But I don't know. We've been talking for over an hour, and if anybody's watching this at all, they're probably asleep.
Well, I hope they didn't have a double martini.
No. Yeah, me too. Although a double martini sounds pretty good to me.
So we'll wrap it up right now. So if anybody has any more information, just comment on this video, and then I will put you in touch with Mike. I'll give you his email address, or I might just post it in the video itself, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Down in the description area, that way you can reach out to him. And then I'll look forward to doing another video with you.
I do too.
Maybe a couple more before the National,
Yeah.
and I look forward to seeing you again at the National.
Yeah.
So.
Well, again, Dave, thank you.
Thank you.
For me, it is an honor. It really is, because it allows me to talk about something that's dear to my heart, and I don't have to bore my wife with it. So.
Hey, I like learning this stuff, because
that's the best part. Yeah, the best part.
I think I remember seeing the postcards at the National, like shortly after you purchased them. But I know you were very busy at another purchase you had, because you were putting them in
sleeves.
It's in sleeves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, there's always a lot of activity at the National.
And I think you were stuffing your face with the nothing bundt cake because it was right next door to you.
No, I didn't buy that stuff.
No, I'm just messing with you.
I know you are.
So, I want to end the recording. If you want to stay on real quick.
Sure.
After, and then we'll just chat for just a couple more minutes, and then we'll go from there.
Great.
So appreciate you coming on again, doing this. And again, I hope everybody out there enjoyed this. And until then, see you all at the next game.